This episode brought to you by Noda, powered by M&T Bank. Noda is banking built for lawyers and provides smart, no-cost IOLTA account management. Visit trustnoda.com/legal to learn more. Terms and conditions may apply.
This episode brought to you by Alert Communications. If any law firm is looking for call, intake, or retainer services available 24/7, 365, just call 866-827-5568.
Welcome to the ABA Journal Legal Rebels podcast, where we talk to men and women who are remaking the legal profession, changing the way the law is practiced, and setting standards that will guide us into the future.
Welcome. I'm your host, Lyle Moran, and welcome to our new sponsor, Noda. My guest today is John Van Amsterdam. He is a shareholder at Wolf Greenfield, an IP law firm headquartered in Boston. John has nearly 30 years of experience in worldwide IP practice, and he chairs the firm's hiring committee. John and I will discuss how Wolf Greenfield has approached hiring amid COVID-19 and talk about the technologies the firm's attorneys have needed to adopt while working remotely. John, thanks for joining me.
Thanks, Lyle. It's a pleasure to be here.
Well, John, could you start by sharing what brought you to Wolf Greenfield originally and the scope of your work now that you're there?
Sure. That's some time ago, but I was originally a scientist and at some point had the opportunity to join Wolf Greenfield, which, as you've already noted, was quite some time ago. And it's, as we are an IP firm, we do all kinds of work with all kinds of technologies, which fit very well with my background as a scientist. And right now, most of my work is in IP prosecution, but of course, also do counseling and some contested matter work as well.
Right. Now, when did you become chair of the firm's hiring committee?
That's an excellent question, Lyle. It's one that I have thought about a few times recently because I can't really remember. But let's say it's been probably about a dozen years ago, something along those lines.
Okay, perfect. And, what was it about the role that made you excited to take it on?
It was something that I had done as an associate. So I'd been involved being on the hiring committee as well as doing a number of hiring activities for the biotech practice group, which is where I'm situated. And it just seemed like I think at the time, it seemed like a natural transition for me to take that task on. And I have enjoyed it very much.
Great. And now, pre-COVID-19, how would you describe the role and activities of the hiring committee?
Our job is to oversee the legal hiring for the firm. So not on the staff side, but I'm happy to discuss that as well. But we really concentrate on the hiring of legal professionals, whether that's attorneys or technology specialists, which are people who are going to become attorneys. So they may be patent agents, or they may be, as I was, a scientist who's just joining the IP profession. And so the specific task of the hiring committee is sort of twofold. One is to oversee the process generally speaking, but also it is to serve as a kind of a QC, a quality control aspect for the hires. So the way our hiring process works is that the individual practice groups that we have will do the initial screening and first round of interviewing for new hires, and then the job of the hiring committee is to conduct a panel interview as a second round of interviews. And that's sort of it's a fairly recent adaptation that we've made to the hiring process. But that's we'll have a panel of approximately 4 or 5 people from the hiring committee, and it's an interesting process.
Now, was that an adaptation or change that you made prior to COVID or since COVID has kicked in?
Yeah, it was prior to COVID. It was sort of it was an attempt to probe a little bit more deeply into what candidates were like, and so we ask, the practice group round, the first round is to assess the person's qualifications from the technical perspective or the legal perspective, and to get a sense of their sort of fit into that particular practice group. What we do is we decided a few years back, and this was pre-COVID, to to see if we could enhance that by having this panel interview in which we would ask sort of more non-standard questions that are behavioral based. And that, it might be questions on judgment or on network or on client focus or on leadership. And they're trying to, we ask some pretty tough questions. They're not things that people can easily prepare for. So we get to see in real time how different candidates handle that. How do they react? How quick are they on their feet and thinking and so on.
And I know you mentioned some general areas, but do you want to give an example or two of a kind of question that they might not be expecting?
Oh, sure. That would, you mean give up our secrets?
If you don't mind sharing one or two of those secrets.
Yeah, that's no problem. Well, I'll give you my favorite. Well, I mean, some of them are kind of more mundane. It might be something like, describe for us the characteristics of a leader that you admire, and tell us a little bit about that person so that we can understand that better. Another one might be something like, tell us about a time that you were working on a project and it didn't go well, and you had to explain that to a supervisor. What happened, and tell us how you handled that circumstance. And it also allows us, all those kinds of questions allow us to have follow-up questions that can, elicit even further responses and really get a sense for how a person thinks about things. But I will give you my favorite question, which is, tell us about how emotions play into your decision making. Most people haven't really thought about that. And so, I get everything from a fairly quick response where they, we hire a lot of scientists and engineers, and many of them will say, well, it doesn't. And they sort of go down the list of, well, this is the spreadsheet that I create when I make a decision. On the other hand, there are folks who will stop and think about it for a few seconds and then give a very thoughtful answer about how that works for them.
Right now, are these interviews that the panel does pre-COVID, would they take place in person typically?
Yes, they would. Exactly. We all get into the same room, and it's not quite the firing squad lineup, but it's actually meant to be very non-threatening. It's actually meant to be a conversation that we have. So one of the things that I like to do when I'm on a panel is to break the ice and make sure that there's a bit of a joke being told or something, so that try to put the person at ease. And it's not really, sometimes people do feel the pressure a little bit, and so we want to lower that as much as we can and just have a conversation with the person.
And now that, we've been in these COVID times since March, how have you altered at all these panel interviews?
In general, the sort of the whole hiring process has changed from the perspective that we can no longer meet in person. So we've actually been out since March of last year. I think we were one of the first law firms that went out, and so after a bit of a pause, just to see how things were going to work out from a business perspective and whether there was still a need to do the kind of hiring that we were doing, we then transitioned to virtual only interviews. And so, that's essentially done by one of the several video conferencing software packages that we can use, and that includes the panel interview. We do that just by jumping on Zoom or Pexip or Teams, and we'll conduct it as if we were just sitting around in the room. I will say that it took a little bit of getting used to, and I think it's not quite the same as being in the room, because you can't, while you can see the person, you can't really get a sense of their body language quite as much as you could before. So it's a good substitute, but it's not quite the same.
And what do you try and do or ask to, replicate the in-person environment as best you can, or to, elicit responses that would be helpful in a virtual setting?
It's exactly the same otherwise. I mean, we use the same questions, we use the same format. There seems to be somewhat fewer follow-up questions as a result of video conferencing versus being in person. And that might just be, the result of kind of being able to pick up on more cues when you're in person, as opposed to when you're looking at somebody on a Zoom screen.
All right. So overall, you feel that the hiring panel can, size up candidates in a pretty comparable fashion to pre-COVID?
I would say so. And I would say the same is true for the initial round done by the practice group. I think that those are individual interviews. And so that in fact is very similar to the way it would have been conducted previously. So I think that overall the hiring process has not really been materially affected, but we're fortunate that we've been able to kind of transition more or less seamlessly into the virtual world with this.
And I've seen, that during COVID, you've both hired attorneys in your Boston and New York offices, as well as patent agents and more technical experts. And I'm wondering if the hiring process between, the legal hires and then those more with the, kind of technical or scientific expertise, if those processes differ at all.
No, those are exactly the same actually. So it would be for the staff side might be a little bit different, and that's done by others at the firm. But from the perspective of whether it's an attorney that we're hiring, or whether it's a summer associate that we're interviewing, or it's a patent agent that we're interviewing, it's that part is all the same. It really goes through the same exact process.
And, more broadly, what allowed the firm to stay in hiring mode even during, the economic crisis that was sparked by the public health crisis?
Yeah, that's a great question. We've been fortunate. I mean, I think, as I mentioned earlier, we took a little bit of a pause just to make sure that things were going to work out for us. And, we relatively quickly found, I think, that, that we were going to be okay. And well, I don't know if it was that quick, but in any case, it soon enough became apparent that we needed to hire people because the work was still there. And that's certainly, we consider ourselves very fortunate that, that our clients were still kind of chugging along with the kinds of work that they needed to have done. So, as a result, we really were able to more or less proceed in a normal manner. I mean, there were of course some considerations, some accommodations made, just to ensure the overall health of the firm, and to ensure that we were able to keep our entire staff. So we did not have, for example, we did not have layoffs, we did not have salary reductions, and that I think has we've been really fortunate to have that kind of circumstance.
Yeah. Well, we'll be back after a short break.
This episode is sponsored by Nota, powered by M&T Bank. You went to law school to be a lawyer, not an accountant. Take advantage of Nota, a no-cost IOLTA and management tool that helps solo and small law firms track client funds down to the penny. Enjoy peace of mind with one-click reconciliation, automated transaction alerts, and real-time bank data. Visit trustnota.com/legal to learn more. Terms and conditions may apply.
As the largest legal-only call center in the U.S., Alert Communications helps law firms and legal marketing agencies with new client intake. Alert captures and responds to all leads 24/7, 365 as an extension of your firm in both English and Spanish. Alert uses proven intake methods, customizing responses as needed, which earns the trust of clients and improves client retention. To find out how Alert can help your law office, call 866-827-5568 or visit alertcommunications.com/LTN.
Welcome back to my conversation with John Van Amsterdam of Wolf Greenfield. John, I want to turn to onboarding now. Once an attorney or staffer was hired, in pre-COVID times, how would the firm go about trying to acclimate these new employees into the fold?
Yeah, pre-COVID, it really is hard to remember a little bit how it's been such a long time. But pre-COVID, we basically would do everything in person. So a person would, on their first day of work, would show up at the office. They would be greeted. They would have a schedule presented to them. They would then proceed to be brought to their office where all their equipment would be, laptop and other computer equipment. And then they would have a series of meetings with people in various firm departments, whether it be HR, IT, finance, paralegals, library services, et cetera. So they had this sort of whole number of short meetings that they would have over the first, couple of days, I think, and it would then taper off into other meetings that they would have more with their practice group, and that would include the group leader, peer mentors, professional development manager, and so on. So that really was the process pre-COVID, and turning to since we've been in COVID world, it really has more or less changed the same, other than of course everything is done by video conference, and because we do have an office in New York as well, there's been no interoffice travel involved. And previously, the hires into the New York office would come up to Boston just because all those departments that I mentioned are located in Boston, and so that has just transitioned into purely a video conference format.
And what has the feedback been from the new hires about how the virtual onboarding has gone to date?
We've had some very positive feedback, actually, and I think my guess is that a part of it is because they may be surprised at just how seamless it is, and they were maybe expecting some difficulties in that onboarding process. But we've had some specific feedback from folks who were hired into the New York office who were laterals, and so those folks would know what it means to work in a law firm. In fact, some of them, I'm sure, have done some onboarding themselves, and they were really very pleased with not only how seamless it was, but how comprehensive it was.
Yeah, and were there any specific things they highlighted that they felt were especially helpful as they integrate into your firm?
I think it was just the amount of contact with people that they had, so they were able to, pretty quickly not only learn about the various functions that might be slightly different from what they were used to before, but also just to meet their colleagues. And in fact, one of the things that they really were very positive about was because they would be situated in New York, but the ability to meet probably even more people from the Boston office than they might have done otherwise.
Okay, and that's because, it's just easier to set a meeting and they don't have to travel and coordinate
Exactly.
schedules that way.
Yeah, exactly. That's exactly right. And I in fact I would guess that is something that we would incorporate going forward, even after we're able to return to the office. That we might still have people from New York come to the Boston office, but I think that sort of as more check-ins and that sort of thing, I think video conferencing is certainly here to stay.
And, you mentioned they've been pleased about the constant contact. I mean, what does this look like? Like Zoom happy hours, Zoom lunches? what are we talking about?
Right. Oh yeah, all of that stuff. Zoom happy hour, lunches, coffees, all of that stuff. We've had trivia night things, just any kind of things to introduce and keep more contacts up, more have some fun with it as well. I think all of those things add to sort of a more personal feeling about everything, because you may be talking with somebody who you only would have seen in the office previously. Now, of course, due to Zoom or Teams or whatever, you're seeing people in sitting in their living room or sitting in someplace, and maybe there's a dog wandering by or there's some kids busting in to ask a question. So it does really humanize kind of everybody's perspective.
And I know you had in these panel interviews, you had a favorite question you like to ask. Has there been anything from your end in meeting new colleagues that you've found, I don't know, has been what you've enjoyed the most in this process?
That's a good question. I think probably so the happy hours that we've had in our group have been, particularly well attended by some of the newer hires. So that's been a great way to be able to get to know them better, whether it's, what did they do previously, or, what are their observations on how it is to work at a law firm, how it is to, work work at our law firm in particular, and what do they find interesting about the work. It just gives a more immediate opportunity to get that kind of information and feedback.
Yeah, and approximately how often would you say that you've tried to do these virtual happy hours or other trivia events, that type of thing?
Yeah, last year we were doing them every week, and we saw some dwindling attendance towards the end of the year. I'm not sure if that was just people were getting a little bit tired of doing it or whatever. But we're going bi-weekly now, and it's early. It's early still in the year, but it seems to have picked up again.
Right. Of course, a new attorney coming into a firm will want to connect with the firm's clients as well. And I know in the past you maybe could have done a client lunch or something like that. How are you helping these new hires get to know clients as well?
Oh, of course, that's much easier. I mean, yeah, I can give you some examples from from my own practice. So
Yeah.
a number of my clients are situated in Europe. So in years past, I would try to make a trip there once or twice a year to go see them. And of course, that's out the window now. It would be harder to take a bigger part of the team with me to go meet the clients, and whether it would be to meet them socially or meet them for business purposes. But now with video conferencing, it's super easy to just have everybody on the same Zoom call, and it's great because I get very positive feedback from clients on this. It's that if they had not previously met the team member on our side, it's great for them to have that chance to do so. And likewise from our side, even very junior people now having a chance to get hands-on experience with the clients is great.
Yeah, because you can just kind of set up a Zoom meeting and then everyone's there, as opposed to, I guess, in the past, I mean, there maybe would have been, as you said, you could only go once or twice a year, and I'm guessing you couldn't send too large a contingent either.
That's exactly right. And the other contacts might have been through telephone calls, which is fine, of course, but there is definitely a value to being able to see somebody while you're talking with them.
Right. And, I know you mentioned earlier there were some things like even post-COVID that you would like to maintain. Is this kind of client contact something you could see, being a regular, part of the routine moving forward as well?
Oh, I'm sure it will be. I'm sure it will be. I think that there are, although there are sometimes it's nice to just have a phone call. At other times it's invaluable to have the video conferencing, and I think that clients seem to enjoy it so much that I'm sure we'll continue to do that, and hopefully add to that, the in-person visits, on a regular basis as well, depending on, of course, where they're located. It may be more or less frequently, but I think the best of both worlds is to combine both of those ways of keeping in touch with clients.
And I know sometimes, there are like partner retreats, for any of these like longer or engagements that would, normally go a day or two. I mean, how is the firm approaching that type of activity?
Mm. Yeah, we actually don't have very much on that kind of time frame. I think the longest meeting that I've been in has been at least the longest scheduled meeting has been 3 hours. And some of our longer meetings have been shareholder meetings, and those have gone. Sometimes they're going that long as well. But we haven't, at least we have in the past, but it's quite rare that we've done the kind of all day retreats in, as I said, pre-COVID time. So we haven't really had to specifically adapt to that.
All right. Well, you mentioned shareholders there. It was something else I did want to ask you about during this discussion, which was I saw in January your firm announced it had promoted the most attorneys to shareholder at one time in the firm's history. And I was wondering what that process was like during COVID-19.
Sure. Yeah, the process was actually, essentially the same as it has been in the past, save for the inability to meet in person. But otherwise, it's we got the same data in advance. The same information to consider. We had the same number of meetings to discuss the candidacies, except as you've already mentioned, there were a lot of them. So I think we had some additional meetings. And there was the same, really kind of robust discussion about each of these candidates as they came up, and that was, I think it was encouraging how quite normal it was.
Yeah, I mean, did you feel like there was anything missing, or as you're describing, was it pretty seamless?
It really was. The whole consideration process was and voting process was really quite seamless. I think the only thing that I can really point to that was missing is after the vote, of course we would ordinarily maybe go visit a person in their office and say congratulations. Now we could do that by phone or video conference. That's fine. But the thing that was really missing was sort of in that first meeting in the new year when the new shareholders join that meeting, and there's a chance to congratulate them, and there's something special about that meeting that I think is really the thing that I noticed was conspicuously absent. And so hopefully we'll be able to make it up to them as we're able to get back to the office. But that's our at least a hope.
Yeah, well, sounds like something to look forward to post COVID-19.
Indeed.
Well, John, thanks so much for joining me.
Lyle, it's been a pleasure to talk with you, and thanks for having me.
I also want to thank our listeners for tuning in. Please be sure to rate and review the Legal Rebels podcast on your favorite podcast listening service. I'm your host, Lyle Moran, signing off.
If you'd like more information about today's show, please visit LegalRebels.com, LegalTalkNetwork.com, subscribe via iTunes and RSS, find both the ABA Journal and Legal Talk Network on Twitter, Facebook, and LinkedIn, or download the free apps from ABA Journal and Legal Talk Network in Google Play and iTunes. The views expressed by the participants of this program are their own and do not represent the views of, nor are they endorsed by, Legal Talk Network, its officers, directors, employees, agents, representatives, shareholders, and subsidiaries. None of the content should be considered legal advice. As always, consult a lawyer.